Hey y'all, what's up? Get Me Out here, and welcome back to my semi-regular web series, YouTube video, podcast thingy, The State of Wild. So just in case this is your first time tuning in, I plan on doing 3 things in the next 15 minutes. First off, as you might have guessed, we'll be talking about the state of the wild meta. So what's dominating, how to beat it, and any decks that might be flying underneath the radar. Second off, we're going to talk about any wild news, controversial topics, or maybe the lack thereof. And lastly, we'll talk about my decks of the week. So powerful meta decks, those that might be flying a little bit under the radar, and a fun off-meta pick that I've been enjoying. So before we get started, just a reminder to leave a like, comment, and subscribe here if you enjoy content like this. It's free and it supports me a lot. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive on in. So about 2 weeks ago, we got nerfs to 2 plagues of the wild format. So first off, we got a nerf to Bloodbloom that absolutely killed Darkest Hour Warlock. So I'm praising that nerf, okay? But the nerf to Bloodbloom means that Darkest Hour has completely disappeared from the meta, which has allowed mid-range and control archetypes the ability to kind of flourish again. Well, as much as they can, while Quest Mage is still a thing. And so now, speaking of Quest Mage, the kind of controversial nerf to the deck, let's go ahead and talk about it. So many people thought that the nerf wasn't going to change anything about the deck. And so while the deck is still up there as one of the best decks in the format, the nerf to the quest has actually done something, as much as some people might like you to believe it hasn't. The nerf to the quest has slowed down the deck, okay? And it's lowered the win rate of the deck by a few percentage points. And that's mainly because it's giving aggro decks the ability to have one more turn to kill the quest mage. And so, like, personal experience, I have been having a lot more success with decks like Secret Mage and Even Shaman and Odd Demon Hunter and Odd Paladin and Pirate Warrior at combating Quest Mage. And so I know that's my personal experience, but so I would just like to say that I think the nerf has done something. It's made the deck worse. And so while a very vocal part of the community thinks that the Hearthstone design team is dumb, I believe that the Hearthstone Designs team's nerfs has had the intended effect. Right? They've kept the deck viable. Right? It's still a good deck while lowering and shrinking the gap between it and the rest of the field, right? So before the nerf, it was up here and the rest of the format was down here. And now post-nerf, the gap is like this, if it's not even lower, right? Because of that, I would call the nerf a success. And another under-the-radar nerf that many thought wouldn't have an effect, me included, was actually the nerf to Kael'thas. So while when high rolled on curve, Kael'thas is still just as dumb as it used to be, but in my personal experience, when it's not getting cheated out on turn 5 or turn 6 with Innervates and Biology projects, it's a lot more clunky than it used to be. Just like that one less mana that you have to pull off, or the one more mana you have to invest in Kael'thas, meaning you're not using it on a spell, means that you're sometimes overdrawing with UI when you weren't in the past, and it's a little bit more clunky. Not saying it's not as good, but it's a little bit more clunky. And so while Jade Druid is still stupid good in the meta, I think there is some merit to at least considering the possibility of heading back to this Oaken Summons package that we used to run with the deck, especially if you're playing Jade Druid in order to target aggressive archetypes. Not saying Kael'thas is bad, I'm just saying Jade Druid is a little bit worse. And that nerf to Kael'thas has had an effect, even though most people didn't think it would. So my whole point of saying this is that the nerfs have affected the meta in a way that I think is very, very positive. So the lowering of the Quest Mage gap to the rest of the field means that a deck is no longer Tier S, and we have multiple decks in Tier 1. So I think decks like Quest Mage, Jade Druid, Reno Priest, Q-Block are all very, very, very good right now in the meta. And because Quest Mage is now more susceptible to aggro, we've seen a rise in decks like Pirate Warrior and Odd Paladin and Odd Demon Hunter to combat that strategy. And as a result, we've seen a rise in decks like Reno Priest and Odd Warrior coming back into the meta to combat those aggressive strategies. And then those decks get beat by stuff like Reno Quest Mage and Jade Druid. And then, thus, those are decks that are not very good into Quest Mage, and so therefore that's kind of our meta cycle that we have going on right now. In general, though, I think the meta is a lot healthier than it used to be when it was only Quest Mage and Darkest Hour running around. So props to the Hearthstone team. And so as we go on, I want to talk about 2 decks that have kind of risen in popularity in the meta recently. So first off, we've got Mechathune Warlock. and then I'm going to talk a little bit about Discard Zoo. So when it comes to Mecha-Themed Warlock, people kind of revisited the deck once they heard that Blood Bloom was getting nerfed, because they wanted to see if the deck was actually truly dead, right? As many people thought it was. So first of all, it's not. We found a combo with Platos and Kael'thas that's pretty much just as consistent, if not a little bit quicker than the previous Blood Bloom combo. The problem is this new combo requires 3 crucial minions, so you're a little bit weaker into Dirty Rat. However, Dirty Rat's not super popular in the meta, so right now Mecha-Themed Warlock's looking really, really good, because it has insanely good matchups into stuff like Reno Priest and Jade Druid, 2 decks that are up there in tier 1 in my opinion, and have just super poor matchups into Mecha-Themed Warlock. And so the deck is good, don't worry about it. Mecha-Themed Warlock is back for those of you that do enjoy it. And another deck that's crazy good, maybe surprisingly so, is Discard Warlock. So as the deck has been refined and we've cut out the bad cards from the deck's become surprisingly consistent, aggressive strategy that you can look to take to ladder if you so choose. The consistency comes from the deck's crazy draw engine, allowing you to draw through your entire deck sometimes by turn 6, turn 7. It's nuts, and it's a crazy new deck. And if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend that you do. And I know I've been going on a little bit in this section, but the last part I want to talk about is something that I'm consistently asked about on stream. So I just wanted to address this for a little bit. Is this question of what are the best decks in the meta? And so while I don't really want to place things into tiers without like proper arguments for what the tiers are, I just want to talk about what I think are the best decks in the format. And so I think there's currently 4 decks that are a little bit ahead of the rest of the pack. Okay, and so for me, those 4 decks are Reno Priest, Q-Block, Jade Druid, and then of course Quest Mage. But the Chasing Pack, there's a ton of decks in this Chasing Pack, and that Chasing Pack is not super far behind. Okay, so this Chasing Pack of tier 2 decks are stuff like Seeker Mage, and Odd Demon Hunter, Odd Paladin. Odd Paladin's really interesting because people have kind of forgotten about the deck because nothing new has been added to the deck, and it's a strategy that's been around for forever, but it's still a crazy, consistent, good aggro deck. Stuff like Pirate Warrior and Mecha-Themed Warlock and Odd Warrior and Discard Warlock and Reno Quest Mage and stuff that we've talked about a lot. So the moral of this little short segment is that there are a ton of good, viable decks in the meta. And the meta is pretty diverse after the nerfs, which is awesome. And so that means if you're looking to climb to Legend this month, you can take any of these decks and climb to Legend pretty effectively, as long as you learn the ins and outs of the decks and their meta matchups. And if you're looking for links or codes to these decks, you can find them in other videos here on my YouTube channel, or you can check them out on my Twitter at GetMeOut. So now moving on to some news of the format, I want to talk tournaments this week. So I actually just got finished playing 7.5 hours of Wild in a tournament hosted by Jonah. So Jonah hosted a 2020 Wild Open, since nothing has been officially sanctioned by Blizzard so far. And so while it's a little bit disappointing that we haven't had anything official, this was an awesome tournament hosted by Jonah. He hosted an EU one and an NA one, and I'm really excited to see other content creators dipping their toes into hosting competitive Wild tournaments. I used to host them a bunch, and I really enjoyed it because I think just a tournament meta and a tournament environment is just completely different than a ladder experience. And while they're different, that doesn't mean it's worse or better, but it's different. It's just a different way of playing Hearthstone, and I just really, really enjoy it. But speaking of tournaments, so Jonah's tournament was hosted this weekend with an EU on Saturday and an NA on Sunday, with over 100 people signing up over both servers, so I would call this tournament a pretty good success. And so the whole point of this was to figure out who the best NA players and the best EU players are and pit them against each other to see who's the best player across both servers. And so just as a subtle brag, I finished 5-1 through the 6 rounds of Swiss, which meant that I finished 3rd place on tiebreakers, unfortunately not first. But that means that I move on to this NA versus EU tournament coming up next weekend. So as much as I meme on stream, this proves that I'm not a terrible player, as I'll be fighting for the pride of NA next week. Speaking of tournaments, there's also a THL Wild League that's going on that's having a ton of success that you can check out on their Twitter. I'm not super involved in this, but I know that a lot of High Legend players and community members are participating in that, so you should definitely check out some of their coverage. And if you're looking to get on some tournament action yourself, inspired by this video, now I highly recommend that you check out Solid Tournament. I'm sure you guys, if you're watching this video, you've heard about Solid Tournament already. The EU tournament's coming up this upcoming weekend, and the NA tournament's coming up on the 16th and the 17th, but the signups are open now, so if you're interested, make sure you guys go ahead and register, as there is a cap of 512 people, so you definitely want to get in there if you're, at least register, even if you haven't figured out your decks. But these are open to anybody, regardless of skill level. So if you're interested and just want to dip your toe into the competitive Hearthstone kind of environment, I highly recommend that you check them out. And links will be found down in the description below if you're interested. And there's even a cash prize if you place top 16. So if you're feeling a little bit lucky, you definitely want to check these guys out. And so with these tournaments happening, I know many of you might not have had experience in prepping for tournaments. So to round out this section, I just want to give a little bit of a few tips and some general approaches when it comes to tournament play. So in general, tournaments are drastically different than ladder experience like I talked about, including kind of a drastically different meta. Especially when there's bans in place like Solemn's tournament will have with banning Archmage Vargoth and the Quest. So in general, tournaments are something that you need to prepare for, though. So both ahead of time and for during the tournament. And so what that means is take time to prep a lineup. So this is the thing that I think is the most important, right? So prepping a lineup, but then also think through your plans and how to play through certain matchups for when it comes to the actual tournament. And then be prepared for a time investment. So the length of your matches can vary, but you have to wait for everybody in your bracket to finish before you can move on to your next round. So just be aware of that downtime, and kind of plan for it. So have something to do and be productive, or a way to relax in between those rounds. So the most important thing when it comes to tournament play, though, in my opinion, other than playing well on the day, obviously, is the prep for the tournament. So building your lineup. And so there are three general approaches, I think, when it comes to building your lineup. So the first strategy is bringing the 4 best decks to the meta. And the reason that this is such a popular strategy is they're the best decks in the meta for a reason, right? They are really, really good, powerful decks. So these are the decks that you probably also have the most experience on because they're the best decks for laddering, right? So let others use and invest their brain power into trying to build a perfect counter lineup that may or may not work, while you just focus on bringing the best decks and playing them well. Okay. The second strategy is bringing 4 powerful decks that are built in a specific way to target a specific matchup that you expect to be popular. And so what this means is bringing 4 strong decks, right? While they might not be the 4 best decks of the meta, just 4 powerful tier 1, tier 2 decks, but they're built in a way that, like, I'm expecting a lot of one specific matchup, so I'm going to use my 29th and 30th cards in these deck lists to increase my percentage points in this certain matchup. Okay? And so the way that this goes is, like, if you expect that matchup to be super popular, you're increasing your win rate of your decks, but you're not completely hedging on that matchup, because if somebody doesn't bring that, your lineup is still good enough, right? You're still running good enough decks that you can beat them, right? And just win based upon the sheer power of your decks. And then the third approach that's slightly risky is bringing an off-the-wall lineup that will 100% win a matchup if your opponent's bringing a specific deck, okay? And so this one's slightly risky because if the meta's not what you expect, or you get slightly unlucky in your queuing it to somebody who doesn't have that deck, you're going to be pretty unfavored. But the upside to this is if you do predict the meta correctly, and you're saying, okay, I'm expecting 90% of people to bring this one specific deck, and my lineup beats lineups that have that specific deck 100% of the time, then you're going to have a crazy good win rate in the tournament, right? And so this is one of the most rewarding, but also one that has the most risk, right? And so the approach that I personally took when it came to top 4 in Jonah's tournament was approach number 2, right? So I brought 4 good meta decks that were slightly teched to make sure that I beat Pirate Warrior and Warlock decks. So the tournament occurred just a couple days after a couple people hit top 5 legend on NA and EU with Pirate Warrior. So I kind of was expecting a lot of people to bring Pirate Warrior, right? So what I did is I brought Even Shaman, a deck that was teched with Galaka Crawlers in my 29th and 30th card slots to help me in that Pirate Warrior matchup, and then obviously Devolve and stuff being really, really good against the Warlock. Then I brought Demon Hunter with double consume magic and mana burns. Great into the Warlock matchup and holds its own against Pirate Warrior already. Then I brought Secret Mage with a Potion of Poly, a secret that I normally hate on ladder because it's terrible into a lot of matchups, but it's really good into Warlock. And if I was expecting a lot of Warlock, the Potion of Polymorph does great. And then for my last deck, I brought a pretty defensive key block, something that was going to demolish Pirate Warrior because a lot of Pirate Warriors aren't running Silence right now, while still being key block, right? Still being one of the best decks in the format. And so what actually happened was I queued into 0 Pirate Warrior, right? I was planning for Pirate Warrior, and I queued into 0 of it, which was, kind of sad, but because my deck was good enough into Warlock and held its own against Quest Mage, which there was a ton of, my lineup of just good decks was able to carry me to a top 4 finish, even though my metagame read was a little bit off. So obviously Solemn Tournament's going to be a little bit different because there's bans, and it might adapt because of these tournaments as well. But I wish you luck in planning, and I wish you luck in the tournaments, and I hope you guys participate. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys and playing against y'all in 2 weeks on NA. Alright, so part 3. Here's where I talk about my decks of the week. There will be one powerful meta deck that I think is the current king, or the one that I'm having the most fun playing. Then I'm going to talk about an under-the-radar deck that I think is sneaky good, or a current meta deck with under-the-radar tech that'll help you gain a slight edge in a lot of your matchups that you might have been missing. And lastly, I'm going to present a meme deck, or kind of a fun deck that I've been messing around with, for those of y'all that aren't into Super Tryhard Legend, or are looking to take a short break at the ranked floor. Alright, so for the powerful meta deck, I wanted to revisit Pirate Warrior. So Jonara actually hit rank 1 Legend on NA with this slightly altered version of the deck that focused solely on Ankar. Okay, so Ankar is a busted card, even after it's been nerfed to 2 durability. And so this version of the deck is kind of all in on it. So the deck runs nothing but pirates and cannons and ways for you to fetch your Ankar. And so while this deck is a little bit susceptible to ooze tech, not a lot of people are running it. And so Ankar is nuts in aggro because it gives you endless fuel, whereas giving you endless refill against control decks that can't remove your Ankar. I think this is the go-to deck if you're looking to destroy Quest Mages, and it's really, really good and holds its own in the aggro mirrors. I did really, really well on it on Legend Ladder, and the fact that it's hit rank 1 Legend should be evidence that it's a really good deck, and this is something that I'm really excited to see. I'm really excited to see Pirate Warrior doing well, because it kind of dropped off the map for a couple of years there, but it's back to being a dominant force in the meta again. So for our second deck, I wanted to feature a deck that's a little bit under the radar. We did talk about this a little bit earlier in the show, but discard Warlock. So it's a sort of new deck, right? It's been refined slowly as the expansion's gone on. But I've been playing a fair bit of the deck, and this is the version of the deck that I think is actually the best right now. Man, Hand Gul'dan is nuts as expected, and Canarthad is a demon mech whipper that a lot of people have kind of hopped on the train of running in this deck, especially with all your 1-drops being demons and a lot of your 2-drops being demons as well. An inclusion to keep in mind potentially as you play this deck is Frenzied Fellwing. So yes, the card's been nerfed, but in combination with Canarthad, and most of your demons being 3 attack, it's really easy to cheat out, right? And you're kind of all in on the explosive openers anyways, and so Frightened Fellwing kind of just gives you another potential avenue. So you can totally check those out over something like the Nightshade Matrons if you're not a huge fan of them. I still really like the Nightshade Matrons, and I think Lothip's great in this deck. The deck's explosive, the deck's fun, and the deck's good, right? And that's pretty much all you can ask for something that's new. And maybe it's good or not for the format, but finally discard being a competitive archetype. Blizzard finally did it. They finally released enough support cards. But yeah, play this deck. Play it so that we get some data and we can tell whether it's actually good or not. And so for my meme deck of the week, I wanted to highlight a deck that I've been revisiting with some new cards, specifically the Dark Portal. So Malygos Warlock has always been a cool deck, and Tempo Mali decks have always had a soft spot for me personally. I love the archetype. And I've been toying around with this idea of Dark Portal, where the only minions are your demons, powerful dragons, and then of course Kobold Librarians, but you're kind of mulling for the Librarians, so you're not normally activating those off of your Dark Portal. But yeah, the ability to hit 4-mana demons or a 4-mana Malygos for the insane burst potential, while just running good Warlock cards, makes this deck actually super viable. I've actually had a 9-4 record with this deck in top 200 Legend on NA, meaning the deck is more than competitive. If you want to, bring out your Malygos that's been, you dust off the Malygos because it's been kind of sheltered for a while since Malygos Druid's been nerfed. But Dark Portal's actually been really, really good in this deck, and it's a rare, so feel free to craft them if you're looking to play this deck. It gives the deck a little bit more cycle, gives the deck a little bit more high roll potential, which is kind of all you can ask for in this style of deck. And you can totally do more than 30 burst damage against Druids and Priests. So this is another one of my pet decks that I love, and I'm going to be playing a ton of it on stream, so keep an eye out for a YouTube video on this deck if you don't really want to play it yourself. But yeah, guys, that's it. I hope you all enjoyed. We'll be doing these episodes fairly regularly with news and new decks every episode. And reminder that there are daily deck highlight videos going up all week, as well as streams over on twitch.tv/GetMeOut. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoy this content. It's free and it supports me a lot. I hope you all enjoyed. Stay safe out there and stay sane during this quarantine period. And I will see you guys next time. Later, guys.